I would like to buy a second-hand car, but I've heard some real horror stories about people getting landed with old bangers. I would like to know how to avoid being ripped off.
Right, now the reason I actually bought this car was because it was actually recommended to me, believe it or not, by somebody who was supposedly a friend and also my family. And he said he had this great Beetle and he'd been working it for years, etc. And so I decided to go and have a look at it and bought it. I drove it home that night and it was okay. The next day I drove to work, the wheel fell off on the A1, the wheel over this side. And I went back to work in an AA pickup truck, which was quite embarrassing, really. So I had the wheel put back on after about 2 days of persuading him to put it back on again. He welded the wheel back on, which then caused problems afterwards because the handbrake went, and they couldn't fix the handbrake because of the wheels had been welded on. From this point, he refused to do any more work on it. About 2 weeks later, the engine blew up, and I took it to another garage, and then I found out that it didn't have the right engine in it. At this point, I'd spent up to about £600, and so I actually was very fed up with it. He'd refused to have anything more to do with it. I couldn't get my money back, so I decided to go to the AA.
Well, if you notice, the bodywork looks quite good upstairs. The paintwork finish is quite nice, but when you look underneath here, unfortunately, there are a few horrible things that I've found. The first thing is over there. You notice the anti-roll bars.
What's that?
The anti-roll bar, that's a suspension arm anti-roll bar that is mounted there, and that bolt is actually loose.
So is that about the steering?
Well, it controls the mounting of that suspension, so that could affect the steering. Yeah, that's all loose. But more importantly, when you look over here, there's a lot of rust developing on the car, and just look at that bit there. It's all rusty, and really it's going to take a lot of money to rectify. If you look over here, they've actually welded a plate on the floor to cover over rust, but it's been very poorly carried out. It's also covered with underseal, so I can't really tell what it's like underneath, but I think it's quite badly rusted because there's a rust hole there, yeah.
So do you think it would pass its MOT in this state?
No.
So it should never really pass in the first place, you don't think?
Not really, no. It's very badly corroded. When we were checking the engine, although it's a 1303S model, the engine number actually refers to a 1200cc engine. It should have a 1600.
But this is the second engine. When I bought the car, I was told it had a 1600 engine in it. That's why I paid £2,600 for it.
How much?
Paid £2,600 for it.
How much?
Yeah. Well, I've now paid, with all the repairs, it's cost me another £600.
How much?
Because I couldn't afford to put in a 1600 engine, I put in this 1200, which cost 180 quid.
How much? Really?
Well, Michelle Collins there with how not to buy a second-hand car. But if you want to avoid getting ripped off, here's some suggestions. Don't be fooled if it looks all sparkling and new, because it could have been resprayed to cover up a bad case of rust, so do look underneath the car. Take it for a drive so that any bits, if any bits are about to fall off, they do so before you part it with any money, but obviously make sure that you're insured. Don't trust the MOT. Although the car may be safe, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work. But the best protection of all is to take someone with you who knows about cars, either a mechanic maybe, or you could always invest in a proper inspection by the AA or RAC. That'll cost you between 50 and 60 quid, but it's a lot cheaper than laying out hundreds of pounds on a lemon. All the information is in our fact sheet, so give us a call after the programme if you want a copy.